Hello, I'm Jamey from Stonemaier Games, and I'm here with a special guest today, Paul.
Hi.
Paul is the designer of our new game at Stonemaier Games, Stamp Swap. We're going to be talking about Stamp Swap today in relation to 10 other games that we really enjoy, that we think if you like those games, there's also a pretty good chance that you'll enjoy Stamp Swap. Paul lives here in St. Louis. He's a friend here that we play disc golf with. I play games with Paul. And so usually I'm doing this remotely, but it's so nice to have you here to have it in person.
First time on camera as well here. I've been in the live chats, but this time I'm here.
Perfect. So Paul, we're going to talk about what Stamp Swap is in general, but how would you summarize it real quick for people who have no idea what it is?
It's an I cut, you choose tile laying game where you collect stamps. There's some drafting, I cut, you choose, and then you score a bunch of points based on your stamp album.
That's a good summary of it. There's very little downtime in the game, which is one of the reasons that I was drawn to it as a publisher. It really moves along at a really nice pace, and I love I cut, you choose. I thought you did it in a really neat way, especially with multiplayer, which isn't all that common. So we're going to dig into 10 games. Like I said, we each have 5 games that we're going to talk about today, as well as some honorable mentions. And why don't we do the honorable mentions real quick? So these are games that we enjoy, and maybe they just didn't quite connect with Stamp Swap, or they didn't make our list in terms of personal preferences. So what are your honorable mentions, Paul?
Art Society, Fit to Print, Kodama, Hanamikoji, and the Stamp Collector's Game, which I just want to show off. It's probably not the best game in the world, but I bought it at our local stamp shop where I learned about a lot of stamps. And what's cool about this game is that it comes with a stamp vault, which includes actual postage stamps from around the world. I thought that was really cool.
Paul did a lot of research about stamps for this game, and it ended up inspiring the art that Connor created for the game. A couple different art styles for the stamps themselves. My honorable mentions, and some of these might even show up on Paul's top 5 list. I didn't put them on mine because they showed up on his. Isle of Skye, Hanamikoji, Cascadia, Cartographers, The Great Split, Azul, Summer Pavilion, Earth, and I wanted to mention Honey Buzz as well, because Paul is a designer of Honey Buzz, a game that I love. A game that doesn't have that much of a connection to this game,
right.
But it is a tile placement game.
Yeah, and I think there's like my design aesthetic is in both.
It absolutely is, yeah. So if you really love Honey Buzz, I think there's a good chance that you'll like Stamp Swap as well. Paul, why don't we start out with your number 5
Perfect
for this list?
My number 5 here is New York Slice from Bezier Games. An I cut, you choose game for up to 6 players, and of course it has this awesome pizza box with a menu, rule book. The production is excellent. And in this game, you sort of arrange a pizza on the table, and someone slices it up, and then you go around the table selecting. So the slicer gets the last one. But the reason I included it in this list is that one of the things that you put in the piles is a power for that day, that today's special. And that's something that we put into Stamp Swap. There are these attendee cards, specialist cards that have powers. And so if you take that, as long as it's in your play area, it will give you some benefit ongoing or when you do something.
I think that's a nice. The other hook that I think is really clever in New York Slice, it doesn't really connect to Stamp Swap, but just the fact that you're cutting a pizza and you're not like rearranging that pizza. You are cutting it into...
It is the way it is laid out, yeah. There's a lot of things I like in the game, too. They have numbers, and there's 3 of the 3, and whoever has the most gets 3 points. And there's 10 of the 10s, and whoever has the most gets 10 points. I love that in games.
Yeah, that's a great pick. That's Paul's number 5.
Let's see your 5, Jamey.
New York Slice. My number 5 is a game that I thought I still owned, but apparently I don't, even though it is a game that I really, really enjoy. And that game is The Whatnot Cabinet. This is a game, so it connects to Stamp Swap in a few different ways. One, it's a game about collecting things of importance to you, but not necessarily importance to other people. But to you, these little knickknacks form your little collection, little beautiful little collection. Where you put them in your collection matters. It has a really neat mechanism in terms of like what you actually get to choose from. Yeah. So you can choose, you can have less agency over your choice, but potentially get better stuff, or you can have
get more stuff.
Agency.
I think.
Yeah, more stuff. Yeah. So I think that's a nice little hook to this game, but it really does remind me in terms of both the aesthetic and just the organization of things that you're collecting that are really satisfying to put together in a nice little spatial puzzle.
Yeah.
The Whatnot Cabinet.
It also has beautiful art.
It does have really, really beautiful art.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, so if you like the Whatnot Cabinet, I think it's a pretty good chance you'll enjoy Stamp Swap.
All right, well, let me get to my number
4
here. I have a game by the same design team almost.
That's right. Yeah.
This is Herbaceous by Steve Finn, Edelbaroff, with the same artist, I think, Beth Sobel. Yeah. And this game is almost an I cut you choose. There are cards that you draw. You're going to have a center pool in your own, and you draw one and see it and choose which place to go, and then the other one goes to the other location unseen. So it's almost like an I cut you choose on your turn where there's a face down and face up, and you choose one for yourself and the other one goes away. The reason I've included it, though, especially, is each player has 4 pots, essentially, that they can store things in, and on your turn, instead of drawing new cards, you can collect the herbs that are there and put it in a pot. And that's how you score points. But each of those 4 things is only scored one time. And that's true in Stamp Swap as well. Each game has 4 contests out, plus a finale contest. And then each round you will choose one to score, and it scores then and not again.
Yeah, Herbaceous, it's a really, really nice game to play. I love that decision. You're right. It really does feel like I cut you choose, even though it isn't exactly I cut you choose. Yeah. My number 5 pick is almost on the opposite end of the weight spectrum as Herbaceous, and that is the game, I put it on the bottom of the pile here, the game Ark Nova. Ark Nova, fairly heavy game about building a zoo. You're collecting animals, which is a connection to the collection element, but very similar to what Paul just mentioned in terms of the goal scoring in Herbaceous. I wanted to pick a game that has that similar goal element, because I really like this element of Stamp Swap, is when you're choosing one time throughout the entire game to score a specific goal, and you can't score all of them in Stamp Swap. The same happens in Ark Nova. At the beginning of the game, you set up these conservation goals, and you can get more during the game, but there's a set number that you can see for all players, and you could either go for you can decide basically how long you want to wait to score that goal. A goal might say you have a certain number of animals from the continent of Europe, and you can score it when you have 2, 4, or 5, I believe is the breakdown, and you get many more points if you wait for the 5. But by then, another player may have grabbed it, or you might be going in a completely different direction, or you may not even see animals from Europe. So the timing of when you score those goals, I think, is really satisfying in Ark Nova. I also picked this. Again, there are many things that are not connected between these 2 games, but you have the collection aspect of the animals, and you have the tile placement. There's a whole puzzle of where you place your tiles as you're building your zoo in Ark Nova.
And it's a game you love.
And it's a game that happened a lot. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That scoring mechanism of the timing reminds me of Kanagawa, too, which I wish I'd put on my honorable mentions.
Yeah.
Because there are these colors, and you get one of them, and, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. My number 3 is one of the games that really was at the core of what I wanted to do with this, and that is Money by Reiner Knizia, the Great Doctor. You can see that the deck is basically just a bunch of currency cards with different values, and in some editions, Reiner has snuck his picture in here. But the numbers on the cards are not points, and it's a hand management game where the cards in your hand come in and out, and at the end of the game, you score your hand. Okay. But the mechanism here that I really love and is not used commonly, everybody gets a starting hand, and each round, a pile of money cards are put here, and a pile of money cards are put in the middle. And then you all take cards from your hand and blind bid for them. So I put down $20 of whatever currency and flip them over. And whoever bid the highest gets first pick. And you can pick either of those piles. But you can also pick from the other player's offerings. So if I really like the cards that you put there, I can take mine, the cards that I bid, and swap with you. And so I get your cards. And now because you have the highest in front of you, you get to go next. And so that's one of the things in Stamp Swap is in the swapping, there is an I cut, and then someone goes first and chooses a pile from in front of another player, and then that player gets to keep the other pile and go next. And so there's this sort of variable and dynamic turn structure. And the things that you have may not be your own in the end.
I see that connection now. I haven't played Money, so it's interesting to hear about that.
Yeah.
And it is something that I really like in Stamp Swap, that you're selecting stamps or selecting things that you might have, and usually they're all things that you want, generally, unless it's something that you drew face down, which we'll talk about in a little bit, face down stuff. But I like that you are getting a lot of stuff that you like, but you're only keeping some of it.
Yeah.
That's a nice, well, not in I Cut You Choose, sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you have some stuff that you don't want.
And you can also, in both Stamp Swap and Money, you can grab something that you know is very valuable for someone else.
Right.
And Stamp Swap does have these rare stamps that are high value, and anyone would want them. So by grabbing those, I might increase my chances to go earlier in the swap phase.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's money at Paul's number 3. I need to try to play that sometime. My number 3 is... I put my games in the
reverse order.
Reverse order is Castles of Magic and Ludwig. This is an I price you choose game where at any given time there is one player who is the builder and the master builder, and they are choosing pricing for that round of all the different tiles that other players can buy, and including them. They get to buy one as well. So it's I price you choose, similar to I cut you choose, and then you're using these tiles, the tiles that you gain, to build a zany castle that is really satisfying when it comes together with different bonuses and whatnot. So it combines these two elements of I cut you choose, even though in the I price format, and tile building. They have a very similar feeling to me on these two games.
And you have different tiles of different types, colors, and so there is the sort of range of things in that deck, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. That's one of my favorite games.
Yeah.
No question. And you've got the beautiful big edition.
The big edition, yep.
All right, getting down to it. I got my number 2 here, which is if you like stamp collecting games, you're going to want to check out Penny Black from Buffalo Games. This is a stamp collecting game, truly, with some really nice touches. First of all, it comes with these very nice and clinky stamps that are plastic. And it has a much simpler and less interactive drafting phase. I think there's just some piles, and you pick a pile. There's no cutting there. And then you arrange them in your stamp album, which also happens in Stamp Swap. This happens to be this gold foiled dual layer player board.
That's nice.
With some very cool stuff. And then you have scoring objectives on each side that are just your own. So it's much more of a solo puzzle, but if you like laying these things out in a grid with rectangles up and down and squares, do that. It also has a namesake tile, the Penny Black, which is one of the most I think it's the first stamp, the first adhesive stamp ever issued. And the Penny Blacks have a special power that they score bonus points for, I think, how many of the same color touch them. And that's a sort of style of objective we have a little bit in Stamp Swap.
So, Paul, as a publisher, should I be worried that Stamp Swap is our game and Penny Black also exists out there, or do you think they both exist in the same collection, or
well, I'll tell you, they'll both be in my collection.
Okay.
And it's funny, this always seems to happen. You design a game independently, and then the theme sort of shows up. Yeah. But compared to Stamp Swap, this is much lighter and way less interactive. It only plays 4. It doesn't play solo. So Stamp Swap is the game I prefer, but I think there is an audience that really would like Stamp Swap, or Stamp Album. I'm sorry, would like Penny Black.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's Penny Black at number 2. My number 2 is a little game that I really love called Sundae Split. This is a game, another I Cut You Choose game, where on any given turn of the game, there's a player who has a big hand of cards, and they need to divide them up into different piles. The two main hooks of this game that really I would say ended up inspiring certain elements in Stamp Swap. One is that there are some negative cards. You're trying to make an ice cream sundae, but there's broccoli in the game, and you don't want broccoli in there, so it's worth negative points. That's paired with the fact that the player who is cutting all these cards up in different piles, they must put some of them face down. There's a certain number, depending on the player count, that they must put face down. And that combined with the negative points adds a really great dynamic to the game, because you don't know when you're looking at a pile what is face down. Maybe in that pile they put a broccoli face up and you're like, okay, well, it must be a really good card face down, but maybe that's a trick. Maybe that's another broccoli. They're trying to fool you into taking that. So I love the dynamic this adds, and both of these things we ended up adding to Stamp Swap throughout the development process,
I think this was in our first meeting about development. You said, I think, let's try a couple of these ideas face down and maybe some negatives, which are faded stamps and Stamp Swap. Which could still score you points other ways.
They could.
But this face down element has been really interesting because you can feel really clever when you can sneak a face down rare stamp and get yourself a bunch of points, or dump something to other people. And of course we have powers that let you look at face down stamps, and there's all kinds of interactions with that. Those were great additions by you in the development phase.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, my number one.
Number 1.
Top choice. We have one of my favorite games, previously my favorite game of all time. That is Isle of Skye by Alexander Pfister and Andreas Pelikan. And if you don't know Isle of Skye, it is a tile-laying sort of game with Carcassonne-style terrain that you're trying to connect and some route building. But each game has different objectives, 4 or 5, I can't remember offhand. I think 5, I don't know. And so the value of those tiles really depends on where you are in the game, and sometimes different objectives score, and other times it matters. And it has, like you said, an eye price you choose, which is sort of an eye cut you choose, where I'm saying you get 3 tiles each round, and you set them in front of you. In Stamp Swap, you get to choose one to keep, and in Isle of Skye, you choose one to axe and sort of get rid of. No one may have it. And then you set prices for those things, and someone can basically give you that money to take your tile. So similar to Stamp Swap, the things in front of you may not be yours, and you have to decide a little bit how much are you willing to pay, or how much are you willing for someone else to pay you. Whereas in Stamp Swap, you might have a stack of just one stamp that is really valuable to you. Right. It is a marvelous game that I truly love. Yeah.
One other key difference there in what you just mentioned is that in Stamp Swap, you are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are guaranteed to have one of your piles, right?
Yes, you will have
when
one.
You take one of mine,
correct.
I automatically keep the other one.
That is correct.
In Isle of Skye, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes 2 different players will buy your 2 different tiles, and you don't have anything. And that doesn't always feel terrible in Isle of Skye, because you get a lot of money. You don't have to pay for anything.
Money,
but this would have been number 1 on my list, too. I think the games have a lot of parallels, even though they are... I mean, I will gladly have both in my collection. For sure. But if you like Isle of Skye, I think there's a very, very good chance that you'll enjoy Stamp Swap.
Definitely.
So, because Paul chose that one, my number 1 went a little different direction. I went with the Isle of Cats. In the Isle of Cats, there's a big spatial puzzle as to where you're putting these polyomino cat tiles. Kind of shows them the back of the box here. But it also features a draft. And there's no drafting in Stamp Swap, but a lot of the cards that you get are different goals that you can score. There's some engine building things. There's a lot of different benefits on those cards that have parallels to the different cards and the goals in Stamp Swap.
Yeah.
So that the spatial puzzle combined with all these different different ways to score and different engine building elements, I think are a good reflection of what we found.
And Isle of Skye, it has a pick and pass draft of the cards.
It does.
But then it has an open draft of the tiles of the cats that you capture.
That's
and
true.
The first phase of each round in Stamp Swap is an open draft, where there's just a ton of stamps out in the middle of the table and other things, and you just go around the table picking them. So definitely some similarities there.
So both games have a lot of interaction with the other players, but there's a good quality time that you get to spend with your own tableau and figuring out the spatial puzzle of your own tableau. I like games that have the mix of those 2 things. I think both of these games do that really well. Yeah, so Isle of Cats is my number 1 pick for this category.
Nice choices.
So, Paul, hopefully this gives people some good ideas about things they might like. And in the future, after people have played Stamp Swap, if you really enjoy this, then these are some other games that you might discover if you enjoy the game. Anything else you want to share about the game while we're talking about it?
No, other than it's been a real pleasure to work with, and I'm so grateful to all my playtesters, including the students. I'm a teacher, and a lot of those students worked on it, and I'm just really thrilled with it.
Yeah, me too. All right, well, if you have any thoughts or questions in the comments, you can do it both ways. If you've played Stamp Swap, if you're watching this in the future and you have a game to recommend based on what you played, or if you have heard some things about Stamp Swap and think you have a game similar to the ones that we've mentioned on this list that you want to mention in the comments, please do so. Awesome. Thanks.